No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us. Okay, welcome to the latest edition of Ignition, the EOS Dublin podcast. And today I am joined on the line by Greg Simpson, who is the founder of EDNA, EDNA.life. And normally on this podcast, I normally sort of say, Greg, tell me about yourself. But I want to jump into this project directly because it is mind-boggling. EDNA, where human DNA belongs to humans. And that's your tagline on the website. So Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jillian. Thanks for having me.
So that tagline on your website, you are human DNA belongs to humans. I guess it begs the question, who is trying to get at our DNA?
Well, just about everybody. Certainly the companies that are willing to accept your genetic material, your saliva, for the cost, it's below cost that they're actually charging you to get that DNA. So once they've acquired it, they're actually going to spend more than they charged you to process it into digital data. But the thing is, once they have it, if you read their terms of service, and I'm talking just about every single genetic sequencing service that you can think of, there's a bunch. And all of them, if you read their terms of service, you find out that your data now belongs to them.
Wow.
And they market it. They basically can sell it. And the average, I think, is running right about $350 a pop. Now, they might sell your DNA 10 times. Which is why they're willing to pay more to sequence it than they are going to charge you for it. Their money is coming from selling your data.
That is very scary.
Well, it can be very scary. You know, consider that some of the people that are interested in your genetic material are weapons manufacturers who produce biological weapons. You're helping them.
Oh, wow. So could you create a biological weapon that would attack only certain types of people?
Why wouldn't you want that? Why kill your soldiers if you can kill only the other soldiers?
Oh, my goodness. That is terrifying. EDNA is quite a scary project, isn't it?
We don't want to be. We don't want to be.
You're nice people. I know you're nice people. But it is kind of scary because we're now going to the realms of, you say later on, like information is power, but genetic information is power over life. We're into that realm of it's. I'm a bit flummoxed at the moment, and I'm lost for words, which is very unlike me.
Very much so. I mean, information is power, and here's really the situation that most people are completely blind to, because we're in this space, and the people at EDNA are the type of people that believe in liberty, believe in freedom, believe in a fair shake at life, where all the rules are sort of known. I mean, that's kind of like what we have in common, the people on this project. And what we've uncovered now is that, take the US, right? The FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, who regulates the reports that you can get on your DNA. Mm-hmm. Basically, they allow 10 variations that a report could tell you about, like a 23andMe or an Ancestry. When you get your data, your DNA run through them, you get the data back, they can tell you about 10 variations in your genes that are what they call pathogenic. They either cause disease or capable of causing disease. 10. Remember that number, 10.
Okay.
That's all you get to know about.
Right.
The rest are regulated. Do you want to know how many there actually are known and cataloged in the government databases, which are public databases? You can go in and look for yourself. 49,814.
So they only release 10 to you, and the rest of them they keep?
Well.
Or they sell?
No. This is scientific knowledge, right? We know that these variations cause, like if you have let's just make it simple. Chromosome 2, gene number 4, position number 800. That little spot, that little letter T that should be there is a G. And that's going to cause you cancer. And they know that. And they know about 49,000 plus of those, nearly 50,000. But you're only allowed to know about 10. Now, that's a direct-to-consumer report. So a doctor or a physician who could interpret that data, a genetic counselor would be able to tell you about more of those. But the information is being clamped down on by the FDA. Now, who funds the FDA? Do you realize that the FDA is the only United States government regulatory body that accepts money Nearly 3/4 of its budget comes directly from big pharmaceuticals. These are the people it's supposed to be regulating. I look at that and say, wow, the cop on the street is taking money from the people he's supposed to be keeping from doing crimes.
That is frightening.
That is scary. Information is power, and the information is being withheld from people because of a financial gain by someone else.
I mean, we know that money runs the world. We know increasingly, well, pre-blockchain, I like to think that money is getting more and more powerful, and those who have are more and more powerful. But that is actually very, very scary.
Well, EDNA wants to stop it.
Okay.
EDNA, and here's how we're going to do it.
Oh, absolutely. Because I was going to say that EDNA is a really nice, gentle name. It's a woman's name.
Right.
It's, of course, it's EDNA, of course. It's EDNA. But so it sounds very nice and safe and secure. So tell me, as opposed to the scary stuff we've been talking about, describe the project. There's two parts, the lab and the DAC. Is that right?
That's correct. The DAC is sort of the senior. Okay. It's a distributed autonomous community. What it means is that members elect from them within themselves, board members, if you will, or custodians, we like to call them. And there's a dozen of these people and they make the day-to-day decisions. However, it's very, very, very transparent. And these people are very high, these elected officials, if you want to think of them that way, are super, super regulated in terms of how they can talk to each other. They have to do it in a public place where all members can listen in. If they don't complete a vote in 48 hours, once a proposal's been brought to them, they're stalemated, let's say, or arguing or bickering among themselves and can't solve the business of EDNA. They get 2 more tries at that, 48 hours, 48 hours, 48 hours, and then it becomes a referendum. And this is all controlled by an EOS contract, so they really can't stop it. It's either sort of like comply, do the business that you're there to do, or it will be known by the people that elected you that you're not doing it. And, the fact is that because we can control their behavior and what they can do and can't do inside this contract, and it's all sort of written out in front of everyone, there's a great deal of responsibility. And the people who want to step forward and take that on and let themselves be seen to the entire group as someone who gets things done or doesn't get things done or has crazy ideas and creates problems and mucks up the whole system, they won't last long. Those sorts of people will be booted out. And we hope to have some really high caliber people within the DAC. Now, the DAC is bigger than just the custodians. We've also got biohackers, genetic counselors, even physicians who are going to play a part in this DAC and allow our members to get access to, okay, we found my DNA. Now I'm sequenced. I'm part of EDNA. My DNA is stored in my wallet, but I need some help interpreting it. The EDNA code has told me that I have a variation on this gene that could be dangerous. I want some advice. Where do I turn? And, typically you would see your family physician, but your family's physician just may not have the information and awareness of what all the latest research is on that particular one. So the DAC's job is to connect those people with people that can help. When you bring in the question of biohackers, people who can talk about CRISPR, and we'll talk about that later, but the idea is that your genetic condition is changeable. No longer are you stuck with the genes you were born with. You can change those. And that technology is going forward at light speed. You thought Moore's law was crazy? Moore's law is nothing compared to the advances in genetic science.
That is amazing. So you can change your genes if there's a problem, a marker for, you have families who've got all, weak hearts. So if you have a marker for that, can you change the gene, and will that be sufficient that you don't die of a heart attack when you're 50?
To sit here and tell you that I can cure someone's heart attack, I can't say that. Okay. What I can say is that the CRISPR technology is there, that genetic condition can be altered. There's a lot more to our health than just our genetic condition. It's a basis, right?
Yes.
But if you've lived a horrible life and you've worked in a toxic waste dump your whole life and you've never exercised, and you've got other issues. Genes are sort of the basis, and then out of that become proteins and other things that act on our cells that give us the bodies we have. So yes, the root can be changed. Is that enough to save a heart that's grown up weak its whole 50 years? It's difficult to say. This technology is advancing faster and faster and faster. And one of the things is vectors that is a problem. How do you get it into the body? Like in a petri dish, I could change that cell in a heartbeat, in a blink of an eye. But to get it to permeate throughout the body, some of our organs turn over very, very fast. Our skin is about the quickest. It takes about 30 days for us to completely have brand new skin cells. And for the ones that are not what they call sentients, where they're dead in place. And what that means is that the cell has died, but it hasn't been cleaned up. And
it's like your nails and stuff, is that? Or is that something different?
Well, wrinkles are a good example. The old lady died in the apartment and no one cleaned her up. So the young lady can't move in. And until that cell gets cleaned up and taken out of the body, the space isn't there for the new cell to grow.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I know we're digressing a little bit, but EDNA, the DAC, will run the lab. And essentially, the lab will be a vendor that, okay, we've got a new member. We want to get them sequenced. Here's their saliva. And what's interesting is that the lab and the DAC will never know anything about a customer except their 12-digit EOS account name. So when you send us the DNA collection kit, all that will be on it, we won't know your name. We won't know your address. We won't know where you live. And we've taken great pains to design the code to where it basically uses a cryptocurrency technique called tumbling, where we'll take your DNA, fragment it into 3 million pieces, and tumble it with 5,000 other people's 3 million pieces before it goes on chain. So it won't need to be encrypted. It'll actually be data in the clear. But it's no good to anybody, even a CODIS forensic scientist trying to link you to the scene of a crime. It just won't happen. Not without your private key to go reassemble out of that vast sea of data your little 3 million pieces that make you you.
This is so, I don't know, the Matrix and beyond. This is crazy. So why would people then hand over their DNA to EDNA?
Well, EDNA is first off and foremost concerned with protecting your privacy and your identity and your rights. So what your rights are is if 23andMe can sell your DNA 100 times for $350 a piece, why aren't you?
Perfect.
If you want to help with cancer, why shouldn't you benefit? Why should 23andMe benefit? And that's what the DAC is there to do, to allow you to monetize and helpfully help cure really serious problems in this world that are genetically based. There are some, we talk about heart disease, that's partially genetic based. There are some that are 100% genetic based, that if you can change the DNA, you can cure the disease.
And this goes back to our conversation before we started rolling the record, is that when pharma is looking for solutions to diseases or conditions, they're looking for pills, not for cures.
Of course, they can't sell a cure. A cure is $350 to do a CRISPR edit and change the DNA. That's not a lifetime of eating a heart pill.
That's mad. So actually, you mentioned CRISPR. Tell us a bit about CRISPR, what it is and how it works.
CRISPR's really, really some amazing stuff. And this is another area of the genetic science that is exploding in terms of both its ability to quickly, simply, and cleanly change your DNA. And in the very early years, and we're talking about version 5, let's just call it version 5. It's called version 5. There were some cancer repercussions from attempting CRISPR. Since version 9, that's been completely erased. They're now on version 12 now. What it is we figured out that bacteria get hit with little, I'm going to call them viruses. They're actually called bacteriophages. But what they are is like a virus is to us, this bacteriophage is to bacteria. And so they invade the bacteria and they start injecting their own DNA into the bacteria's DNA. And that develops sickness and the bacteria dies. Now, if the bacteria is fortunate enough to not die from the virus, what it does is part of its immune system makes a copy of the invader and it hides it in a certain area of its DNA. So the next time, and if it lives, the next time this invader shows up, this bacteriophage, the bacteria's immune system goes, I know you. I know what you are. And it can attack it. Now, Jennifer Doudna and many other scientists, a group of other scientists around the world, had figured out how to take this immune system bacteria fancy trick move and adopt it to humans. So they could basically use a protein to go in that would do what the bacteriophages, the bacteria's DNA does, which is the protein rolls along the DNA looking for a specific spot. It's hunting for a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And they can program that. It uses a 20-letter code that will go through and find a 20-letter string and go, this is where I'm supposed to be. And it will be on one letter out of the 3 billion letters, the 3 billion pairs of letters that make up our DNA. And it will cut. Once it's cut, we can turn the gene off if it cuts that. The other thing we can do is we can take this protein and 3D print in a laboratory a section of DNA. DNA is just molecules. So we print these molecules, molecule by molecule, and then we slip it into the protein and say, hey, carry this with you. And the molecule, the protein or the DNA string is designed to fit the gap. So when it cuts, it slips in a section of DNA, splices it in, if you will. At that point, we can turn a gene on. So you have now, if you think of your DNA printed out in a Word document, right? 3 billion pairs of letters, 6 billion letters in a Word document. We now have an insert and a delete key.
That goes straight to that point.
That goes right to the letter. So we can pretty much change anything we can uncover. Now, the downside, or the reality is, we understand well about 1.5% of our DNA. That's what's
tiny amount.
It's very small. And so you shouldn't be frightened or disappointed if you've given your DNA to another sequencing service, because the opportunities and the unbelievable advances that are in our near future here as we break open the rest of this DNA they're going to be mind-boggling. I mean, things like IQ can be altered, things like, it really gets frightening when you start talking about CRISPR and the power of it. What happens when your next door neighbor's kid comes over and says, I'd really like some wings, hollow bones and wings. Yeah. And your daughter says, Dad, I want gills. I really love to swim. I want to be a surfer girl. Can I get gills? Please, Dad. It's only $350.
Wow. And do you think that'll happen? Is that in our near future?
I think it's coming much, much, much quicker than people can possibly imagine. And, I'm a very kind of down-to-earth person mostly, and I don't have that great of an imagination. What is actually going to happen is going to blow me away. Even with the idea of gills and hollow bones and wings, I think I'm really, really seeing shortness on what's possible.
Because I would be a little bit conflicted in some ways, thinking, is that right? And you very purposely do not go into ethics. You're saying this is your website doesn't say that you guys have the right or wrong, whatever. But then you have an example, because I was saying to you again before we started this to record this conversation, is that GMO in my mind, because I'm kind of organic, my kids are vegan. I'm not. I'm using them as they're vegan, so I'm taking their reflected glory. But I became an anti-GMO and Monsanto and all the rest of it. But then you give an example on your website of a little girl who had a terrible disease, a fatal, wasn't it a fatal form of cancer?
Definitely fatal. Definitely fatal. It would have killed her.
CRISPR went in and turned off one of those markers.
Yes, she's alive today.
Yeah.
And this is way back. She should have been dead by 2003 or 5. I don't recall.
She's a young woman now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That is amazing.
So, we look at GMOs mostly because of the horrible way they've been used. And when it's profit-based, humanity suffers. When corporations without social conscience can do things and have one and only one mandate, make profit. Yeah. And that's the mandate of a corporation. And as a matter of fact, corporations can be sued for not making profit and doing something that benefits humanity instead.
Which is crazy.
But it's true. And it's in the law that's what that entity is allowed to do. And because of that, we get the system and the conditions on earth that we have. EDNA is not a corporation. It's a DAC. And as a community, we're going to work together to ensure that there's a social conscience left here, that Now, does that mean we're going to dictate what people can do? No. If you read our Constitution, we reserve the right to say it's not your right to tell us what we should be. Our identity is ours. We own it, and you cannot own it. You cannot take my identity from me, which is my DNA. You know, if there's anything on this planet that is your identity, your driver's license certainly isn't, but your DNA is definitely you. And because we respect that right of ownership and that right of privacy of that data, I think we're slightly different. And those are core tenets for EDNA as a community, that if you don't believe in our Constitution, you can't even vote. You just have to recuse yourself from all participation. So our Constitution is pretty core to us. And what we're talking about there is that you can't necessarily dictate what other people would do, because it's the same way you can't own somebody. That's slavery. I can't own your DNA and say, this is mine.
Yeah.
No, it's yours. But likewise, I can't tell you what you should do with it because it's yours.
It's a fundamental right, isn't it? And the one that's been sidestepped in this modern world where money is pulling all the strings.
That's true. And, you know, it happened so rapidly. We didn't have a chance. You know, if you go back to when most of the rights in the U.S. were granted, you're talking Bill of Rights, and that is substantially a different time. The acceleration of science and the acceleration of information is nothing like that. So people had time to digest the repercussions of actions. And now we do things at such a breakneck pace. There's no time for anybody to figure out what that means.
Yeah. I mean, I quote often when I do my ranting and raving, the Oxfam report that they produce in conjunction with the Davos conference each year. And, you know, the last few years, 1% of the world's population owns 83% of the wealth.
That's horrifying. Horrifying.
And it's getting worse until blockchain. Until blockchain, all my friends go, "Oh no, she's onto blockchain again." I know I'm going, because this is a way to change the huge inequalities.
Yes, let me jump on that. The FDA as a governing body says you're not allowed to know about, you know, the vast majority of what might be wrong with your genetic information. But if the blockchain is telling you, because there's somebody I'm not saying I'm going to code, but if somebody might have coded something and stuck it on the blockchain that could access that DNA because we left it in the clear and send a message to your wallet about some condition, what are they going to do? Arrest the blockchain?
Yeah, I like that. I like your thinking. But it's right too as well, because, like, again, that little girl, Emily, who's a young woman now, hopefully going to college or married or having babies, whatever she's doing, I don't know, having a wonderful time, I hope. But if you can cure people, why not cure people? You know, I mean, that is like the fundamental, it's just, like the same way, I suppose, if you can feed people, why not feed people? You know, but it's just, I don't know. Your project leaves me breathless. I keep on getting to full stops and going, I don't know what to say next. I'm blown away by it. So tell me, at the very start, I didn't ask. So who are you? What's your background? You're not a scientist, am I correct? Or you're not a medical scientist?
Well, you know, that's very interesting. The definition in the dictionary of a scientist is one who gets paid for doing science, or at least one definition. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I am, except you look at my accreditations and my background and you probably wouldn't recognize me as a scientist. My background is in computer science. After I self-taught several computer languages, I went to work in the private sector and did some work for TransUnion, which is a big credit reporting bureau, like Equifax or things that will manage people's bill payments and did they make them on time and record all that and give it out to customers. Did some rewrites of some very old code and modernized it. And then after that, got into consulting and opened a boutique software shop. The only real program we built was called Ergo, and NASA used it began using it after the Challenger debacle. They had a very big problem at NASA in terms of testing parts. When you destroy $1 million part to test how it's going to hold up under stresses, you've spent money. And there's always a trade-off between how many times you're going to test this part, how many times you're going to destroy it, and how much money you have. And so they were looking for a more efficient way to expend their budget on ensuring that the shuttle didn't fall apart. So they took my program and it saved them a bunch of money and they were real happy. And I actually gave it to them because I really didn't have a market yet. And I was looking this, I thought I could run around and say, well, NASA's using it. Must be good enough for them. Maybe you could use it. And that didn't work out so well for me, but it came along and I ended up at Oracle and I ended up working with super large databases and vast amounts of data. And then about 10 years ago, I want to say, Oracle, there became a new law in the United States that a vendor was responsible for HIPAA information. Meaning, once there's healthcare information in the database, the vendor, Oracle, was also responsible for ensuring HIPAA compliance. Now, we had never, as a corporation, faced that sort of, oh my God, I have to hide all personally identifiable information. How are we going to do that? Where do we need to do that? And realized we had basically hundreds of thousands of customers all around the world with billions and trillions of rows of data. And so I was put in charge of heading up and playing a significant role in that effort. And I became introduced to DNA data at that point and decided that I didn't want to be at Oracle anymore. I wanted to do something like EDNA because I saw a lot of things wrong. And so about 7 years ago, I began prototyping EDNA.
Why did you choose DNA? Where did that come from?
Well, the power of it. It's easy to recognize. You only have to read a few scientific articles to really understand what the future is. And in terms of health, it's DNA. The next 10 years will be nothing but. You'll see it more and more. And the explosion of scientific articles in the journals relating to genetic discoveries it's exploding. And I saw that as the next wave of what you and I think of when we say high tech, right? Computer tech. Well, biotech is the next tech. And I think that as a future, there's a lot more to be done there. A lot more interesting things will occur. Not much is really happening in software anymore. I mean, yeah, there's some shinier things and some flashier graphics, but the code of code, and not only that, computers are learning to the point where they're now writing software. As they get better, there won't be much jobs around to write software or cure problems in database. Now, I don't want to go down that artificial intelligence pipeline because there is no such thing, but the fact is they're getting very smart in teaching computers to mimic smartness, mimic intelligence.
But the DNA is, well, you're right. Even our short conversation here, my mind is boggling at the advances that are happening and the real application on us as human beings, and on humanity. It's huge.
Yes.
So tell me then, why did you choose the EOS network? Blockchain?
Well, no one else can do it. No one else can do what we want. I attempted, not many people know this, I don't advertise it, but we had kind of a hiccup start a couple of years ago on the Ethereum network, and we failed. We essentially failed because of the cost and coupled with the inability of the Ethereum network to keep up with loads. We realized right away, and CryptoKitties kind of super confirmed this for us. We suspected, but when CryptoKitties happened and that little game basically buried that network for days and days, we realized we would never make it there. And I happened to be at a conference in Acapulco and sitting poolside and started up a conversation with the couple next to me. And suddenly I found out he was one of the lead developers for EOS. And he said, "Hey, you ought to look at EOS." And wow,
I was that's serendipity.
Right. And so he and I and his wife sat there and talked for a good 6 hours about both EOS and our project and realized that there was a huge amount of synergy. And they actually had a promise to be able to deliver what we need. And as I looked deeper into it, it just more and more got confirmed once I got back home and started exploring and learning to code EOS. And now I've written 2 contracts and writing the DAX contract currently, and I'm super happy with the network. I couldn't be happier.
That's amazing. That's a real testimony for the blockchain.
Yeah,
it's cool. So tell me, if people want to go and find out about all... Oh, sorry, before we do this, before we close off, I want to ask you, you have a DNA tattoo, don't you? Tell me about that. This is so cool.
So one of the main tenet of EDNA is that my DNA is my DNA. and I should have rights to it, and I should have control over the privacy of it. And if I want copies all around the world destroyed, I should be able to have that. It's mine. It's not theirs. So this DNA is mine and mine alone was the original slogan of EDNA, if you will, before it was even EDNA. And what I did is I went to a website, you can probably find it out there if you hunt, that will convert English language to DNA letters. And then I went to a company called AdGene. It's a nonprofit where I gave them $350 and I said, code me this. And the words I put in the website were, this DNA is mine and mine alone. And I had that turned into a string of letters, CATG. So now I've got the DNA that represents that, if you will, translated English to DNA. And I had AdGene mix that up for me and stick it in a CRISPR delivery system, and I injected it. So now, about 6 months later, I went back and I resequenced myself, and sure enough, I found my tattoo in my body.
I love that, because I've been saying to my kids for a long time, I must get a tattoo because it's all trendy, and my kids have tattoos. Not a huge amount of them, but a number. But I've always chickened out. So maybe I should get a DNA tattoo.
There you go. There you go. Of course, nobody but a really super nerdy guy would be able to see your tattoo.
Well, I'd probably put it, if I did get a normal tattoo, I'd probably put it someplace out of view anyway. Because I grew up in a time where tattoos were not seen as nice things, or nice people didn't have tattoos. And now I'm into a different generation where my kids have tattoos, and I'm not going, no more kids, no more, that's enough.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I'm a bit older too, and tattoos were just for bikers and sailors.
Exactly. Just what wasn't intended. It's mad. It's been amazing talking. My mind is still boggling. I encourage everybody to go and look at your website. So can you tell people where they can find you, Greg?
Yeah, the easiest way to get a hold of us is at edna.life, HTTPS edna, EDNA.life. And that website is about to be taken down here in the next week or so and put up with a fresh one. We're very excited about the new site. It's got a lot more information, a lot clearer, a lot easier to digest. The current one's a little sluggish in terms of getting through it, a lot wordy without getting the point. But be that as it may, the other place you can find us is on Telegram. And if you go to the website, down at the bottom of the first page, you'll see a Telegram logo. That's sort of a chat room. And there's a lot of activity in there with people asking questions and doing things with our tokens and all kinds of fun stuff. And it's a pretty active little community, and I'm almost always available in there.
Okay.
There's a couple people that watch and let me know if somebody has brought something forth and wants to talk to me direct. So I try to keep myself as much as I can available to answer questions directly.
Brilliant. Well, I want to thank you for your time today, Greg. It was absolutely, my mind it hurts. It hurts. There's so much going on in it, which is it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I like when my brain hurts. I need to lie down, I think, in a dark room for a couple of hours. And so we've been speaking today with Greg Simpson, who is the founder and CEO of EDNA.life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jillian.